Welcome everybody to our celebratory event. We're very excited to have this today. We have the participants number is zooming up, so we will just wait a few minutes for people to join before we kick off. I hope everybody is well and keeping safe. It's a shame that we couldn't do this in person, but I think in terms of sustainability, it's much better for the environment that we stay where we are, and certainly a lot safer. And it also opens this up to many more people to join. So again, a very big welcome to our celebratory event, 10 years with HeidelbergCement and BirdLife working together to support and help nature. Okay, so we shall start. So we're here for an hour of fun, celebration, excitement. We will start off with the MOU signing. We'll get to that in a bit. And then we will do a showcase of the projects and finally end up with a talk about restoration and the role of business with biodiversity, particularly looking at the COP15, which starts next week. We have a Q&A, so please feel free to use it. We'd like this to be interactive. We will be answering those questions in the second half, so please join by popping your questions in the Q&A. But we have to start with business first, and this year, despite it being our 10-year celebration, is also the renewal of our Memorandum of Understanding with BirdLife. And so let's start. If I can ask Patricia and Nicola to sign the MOU, then that would be fantastic.
Great, thank you.
It's my first virtual signing, I have to say.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we look forward to 3 years going forward. Good, so that's the business done. Now I will introduce our new Chief Sustainability Officer, Dr. Nicola Kim, who will give some thoughts from her perspective on the partnership, reflecting backwards and looking forward. So Nicola, if I could ask you.
Thanks, Karen. So welcome everybody. HeidelbergCement is one of the world's largest integrated manufacturer of building materials. This means we have a large footprint with more than 800 quarries in over 50 countries. So it's vital that we protect many different kinds of habitats and species at these locations. Given the complexity of protecting biodiversity, we looked for a trusted partner to help us deliver on our commitments. And we found this in BirdLife. First, and most importantly, we value the importance of nature and the sustainable use of natural resources. Second, we both take a scientific-based approach. Third, we both have a large geographical span with global and local engagement, which enables on-the-ground implementation. Today, we're celebrating 10 years of working together. We're proud of how we've raised knowledge and awareness on biodiversity. We've collected data to support decision-making, built relationships with communities, and lobbied for policies that support businesses' contribution to nature. I'd like to mention some highlights from our partnership. In Israel, our code of conduct for invasive alien plant species is now part of national regulations. We've advanced the scientific understanding of silt lagoons for wading birds. We engaged employees through a citizen science initiative on recording birds. We educated and empowered local women in Burkina Faso. And finally, BirdLife is an important partner in our Quarry Life Award. It's been a busy 10 years, but now more than ever, we need urgent action for both climate and nature. The role of business in achieving net zero and nature positive has never been more important. The next areas we'll be collaborating on are first, biodiversity net impact assessments at our active extraction sites. Second, further exploring temporary habitats during conservation. And three, driving our restoration agenda. We look forward to further strengthening our partnership with BirdLife to protect biodiversity. Now back over to Carolyn.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I think that was a great overview of why we've partnered, and it's starting to introduce some of the projects. And you can see it's not only about nature, but it's also society too. And it's very important that the two come together and support each other. So now I'd like to hand over to Patricia, who will give her perspective from an NGO. So Patricia, CEO of BirdLife, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicola, and thanks, Cass, for organizing all of this. It's fabulous to celebrate our 10th anniversary of the partnership that we've forged over this great decade with you guys. I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to connect. I'm actually at Heathrow Airport right now. I'm about to leave for the States. So we recorded a video that is possibly much better than me speaking with a lot of noise around me from the airport lounge. So if it's okay with everybody, we'll just put that video on. Hello, I'm so sorry I cannot be with you in person today. Nonetheless, thanking HeidelbergCement on this 10-year anniversary of our incredible partnership together is very important to me. And of course, thank you, Cass and Nicola, for inviting me to join you all. We have grown our collaboration over the past decade, and it's proof positive that business and nature conservation can work, must work together, hand in hand, if we are to successfully address the planet's existential crisis. The numbers are as solid as the science. From assessing nearly 4,000 sites in view of their closeness to areas of high biodiversity value, 2,000 bird species recorded in quarries, more than 50 biodiversity surveys, 40 local quarry conservation projects around the globe, 6,500 hectares and 110 kilometers of shoreline enhanced by biodiversity restoration, to 500 HeidelbergCement environmental managers and site staff engaged. Phew, there aren't enough fingers in my hands to add it all up. And that's not all. The partnership has been proud to have initiated and coordinated the development with the extractive sector, a code of conduct commitment to managing temporary habitats for the benefits of biodiversity within active quarries. Also dear to our hearts, and an engagement that shows HeidelbergCement's commitment to communities, is the generous support to our global Spring Alive program, which reaches millions of teachers, parents, and children, and creates enthusiasm and awareness about migratory birds. Let's zero in and celebrate two granular examples of a specific HeidelbergCement BirdLife on-the-ground practical conservation successes. In Ghana, we saw the propagation from seed of nearly 5,000 Talbotiella gentii young trees in a HeidelbergCement quarry nursery, a species critically endangered and endemic to Ghana. From the nursery, they were then planted in the forest reserves in an attempt to help reestablish the species. Another truly concrete example, pardon the pun, was the shoreline enhancement and concrete floating islands established in the HeidelbergCement Tovakov quarry lakes in the Czech Republic. According to our Czech BirdLife partner, these innovative islands support about 20% of the Czech breeding population of common terns. Our planet is at a tipping point for its survival. Protecting and restoring nature now is critical. Together, and for a decade, HeidelbergCement and BirdLife have been leading the way on action to do so. I'm so grateful to the HeidelbergCement family for locking arms with the BirdLife Global family to deliver real results for birds and biodiversity. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It is now my pleasure. Cass, I think it's back to you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for indulging us with the video.
Thank you very much, Patricia. So we have a second celebration today, not only 10 years, but we're really happy to use this opportunity to launch a new joint statement between HeidelbergCement and BirdLife International, well, sorry, BirdLife Europe, on the restoration law that's upcoming within the European Commission. I think many of us on the call are eagerly awaiting this new restoration law. It's really going to hopefully push forward the work that's done on nature conservation in the European aspect, but also inspire what's happening at the global level. I will hand back to, I think there's a short video also from Patricia regarding the joint statement. So we will hear a few words from Patricia via the video, and then I will pass back to Nicola for our perspective on the joint statement.
Marianne, I think we were going to do the second video. Unless you want me to speak really quickly about the statement, I'm happy to do that. Yeah. So we're delighted that we are going to be co-signing this statement. For those of you who are not aware, the Convention on Biological Biodiversity is going to have the Conference of the Parties starting next week in Kunming in China. Given the circumstances, is going to be pretty much online, and it is going to be the starting point of the negotiation of the new agenda for nature. This is the time when the governments of the world are going to come together and really demonstrate the ambition that they have to turn around the crisis of biodiversity loss and recognize that it is a two-sided coin with the climate crisis. So we are very much hoping and demanding that we end up with a very strong and ambitious global biodiversity framework with very concrete targets and milestones that enables us to turn around our relationship with the planet and restore nature to make it thrive and sustainable over time. So we are delighted to share with HeidelbergCement this statement that will be shared with the leaders that will be meeting in China next week.
Thank you very much, Patricia. So that sets the scene. And now I'm very happy to pass back to Dr. Nicola Kim for a few words from what inspired us, why restoration is important for us, and why we're interested in this joint statement. Nicola.
Thanks, Cass. The economic importance of nature is well understood. Society needs to reverse the loss of nature and maintain the integrity of existing biodiversity. And restoration plays a critical role in increasing and reconnecting remnant habitats. HeidelbergCement's contribution to restoring nature has been well recognized for many years, from the biodiversity key principles, which were published in 2011, to specific biodiversity handbooks in 2017 and 2018 with best practice restoration techniques. We have flagship restoration projects across the world, like the Banksia Woodland project in Western Australia and the largest man-made reed bed in the UK with our BirdLife partner, RSPB. We want to further demonstrate our commitment to restoring nature. This is the motivation behind the joint statement with BirdLife on restoration. We challenge the European Commission to be bold and progressive in developing targets in its upcoming restoration law. As evidenced at many of our sites, especially those designated as Natura 2000 areas, the knowledge on how to restore nature is there, but the commitment for action by society needs to be supported through policy. With our joint statement, we ask for the co-benefits of restoration to be adequately recognized, particularly with respect to climate mitigation and adaptation. The sensitive restoration of our sites with river valleys demonstrates the win-win-win scenario of extraction, habitat creation, and flood alleviation. The extraction sector needs to support the restoration agenda as a significant land manager, and policy can enable the contribution of this sector to be maximized. We're grateful that BirdLife joins us in making the significant ask through our joint statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. So we didn't want to read out the statements as that can be quite dry, but you'll see on your screen now, this is what the joint statement looks like. Please don't try and read the small print, but we will be sending a link to the document at the end of the event in the chat, so watch out for that. And then in a follow-up email, we will also be sending through the joint statement. I think this is a really exciting time. The UN decade of ecosystem restoration that was kicked off on the 5th of June on World Environment Day has really given a good motivation for people to get on the ground and do some work. Strategy is good. We need strategy, particularly for long term, but certainly actions on the ground are needed now if we're going to reverse biodiversity loss. But I want to now move on to what inspired the restoration statement. And this was really looking at what we've learned over the last 10 years. We've had many projects in many countries, and we want to share with you now a short video which tries to encompass all the good work that we've done. Of course, we would be here for hours if we documented everything, but hopefully this gives you a nice overview of the projects that the partnership have delivered. So please play the video.
These quarries can be vital stepping stones for birds on migration, helping to connect between natural and semi-natural wetland areas on their migration flyways. A very good example of that is here at Leadingworth in Cambridgeshire. This is a wonderful project being advanced by Hansen, that's Heidelberg in the UK, and the RSPB, that's the BirdLife partner in the UK.
Great, that's fantastic. And thank you so much to all the hard work from BirdLife and from Shane Sparg in making that video possible. I think this is a really great celebration of what we've achieved. The video will be available also afterwards, and watch out, we will be using this to promote the partnership across various social media channels. So fantastic, thank you. Okay, so now I want to introduce Martin Harper, who is the Regional Director for BirdLife Europe, for the last part of this event, which is very much looking to be very discussive, very interactive. So again, I please urge you to put your questions in the Q&A, and you have free will to really grill us on some questions. I'm sure we're both willing to take up the challenge. But first, if I can ask you, Martin, that film really showcased a number of projects, and I know certainly some are very dear to my heart. But I wanted to ask you, which project particularly stood out for you and captured your imagination?
Well, the first thing to say, Kaz, is many congratulations to everyone who's been involved in the partnership for the last 10 years. I've actually only been working for BirdLife for the last 4 months, and so I can't claim any credit. But so what I really liked from what I've seen and what I've heard is not just the restoration agenda that the partnership has been able to follow, but actually the particular focus on delivering for threatened species. Because in my experience, it's great to put in place the new habitat, but unless you take account of some of the particular needs of individual species, like the terns in the Czech Republic example, or indeed the threatened tree species in Ghana, then actually you won't necessarily get the results from a biodiversity point of view. So the fact that it is a strong restoration agenda and real particular care given to the needs of individual species is what I think helps make it stand out.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, and I think, so I've come from an NGO background, for those of you that know me, and I think that's what's really inspired me about certainly working in this position and working with this sector, is the fact that, you know, we can start from fresh. We have essentially a blank canvas that in certain circumstances we can really turn around to create these wonderful habitats, and of course you make the habitats and the species follow. So yeah, I echo your thoughts there. It's a remarkable feat that I think isn't always necessarily recognized, and again, I think with our joint statement we really want to push this forward about, you know, what the opportunities that the sector can actually provide. We heard in Nicola's opening speech the key reasons why we were so keen to partner with BirdLife International, and how a lot of your values match with ours. But it can be quite controversial for an NGO to work with business, particularly our sector is not always seen as the most positive. So what was the motivation behind BirdLife partnering with HeidelbergCement?
You're right, Kaz. Sometimes the relationship between NGOs and corporates is, you know, it can be good, it can be bad, it can be a bit ugly. And actually, in my experience, I've had experience of all of those. I think, from what I understand of the origin of the partnership, and I think this applies to any relationship between an NGO and a company, is there a shared commitment to change? And that commitment to change has to start from the very top of an organization. And I think that Heidelberg showed that very early on, for example, by doing the proximity studies around its future quarry sites and how it might potentially have impact on important bird areas or other protected areas. And to my mind, that showed absolute intent from the outset. And then subsequently, you know, clearly, as everyone has said, Patricia said, Nicola said, and the video has shown, huge impact has then been achieved as a result of the partnership. But perhaps most importantly, and this I think is a real test of whether a company wants to do good in the future, it's partly about getting its own house in order, and obviously, you know, causing no harm and trying to restore biodiversity, but it's also about advocating change. And I think what's been great over the last few years is watching Heidelberg and indeed the cement community advocate for real change, both initially to defend the EU nature directives, which were at risk, and you came in to call for high standards, which I think was incredibly important. And now, of course, you're joining forces with us to issue this challenge to the European Commission to set a really high ambition in terms of its EU restoration law, hopefully 15% of land to be restored by the end of the decade. So I think that a partnership built on trust with commitment from the top can deliver great things. And I think it's an example to many others about how you do an NGO and corporate partnership.
Perfect, thank you. I was going to ask you about the key pointers for business, but maybe you've already answered those in your question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, as Nicola mentioned and Patricia's mentioned, it's a really crucial time for the world. We've got leaders joining together to try and agree new climate deal, but also a new biodiversity framework. And I think, as Nicola said, we're wanting companies to commit to being both carbon neutral, but also nature positive. And you as a company have quite rightly committed ambitious targets, which you're exceeding in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And what I hope will happen over the coming months and years is that companies will start to basically do for nature what they're beginning to do for greenhouse gas emissions. And there's a community called Business for Nature, which I think have identified 4 really important steps for all businesses, which is really to assess their impacts at the moment. You need to know where you are, then to commit to targets to drive performance, and then really to act to do no harm and to hopefully restore nature, and in the end to advocate. So those 4 steps I think are absolutely critical, and we're very much here to support you as a business to try and set the ambition in the right way that works for you. And again, what I hope we can do is to showcase what Heidelberg is doing to others, because we need the impact of this partnership to inspire others to do more. So that's my perspective. But I might turn the table on you, actually, if that's okay, Kaz, because there is a specific target in the new draft biodiversity framework which relates to all businesses. And I think it's target 15, which says that all businesses should assess and report progress and reduce negative impact by half and increase the impacts while working towards full sustainability of the extractive sector. So therefore, there's a global gauntlet being given to you and the rest of the extractive industry community. And I just wondered if you wanted to offer any views to people who are listening about some of the challenges and opportunities that you face as a business in rising to that challenge.
Certainly, thank you for the question. So we're really interested to see that action included, and I think this is a good step forward. This is something that business as a whole, particularly through Business for Nature, as you mentioned, has been lobbying for. There are calls to strengthen it even more, but I think it's crucial that business really do understand their impacts, and this is why a strong part of our partnership really has been around understanding the impacts through knowing our geography, knowing where our sites are, being able to regularly undertake a proximity study. We subscribe to the IBAT tool. This is the Integrated Biodiversity Assessment tool. And for us, this is a really crucial way of us understanding where our sites are, how we might impact them, how we may impact them positively as well. It goes both ways. It's both a risk management tool, but also allows us to investigate opportunities of how we can integrate restoration to support targets. And we're very interested in the STAR metric that's just been released through the IBAT tool, and we'll be taking that forward. But I think the kind of words of wisdom to business out there is to be able to understand your footprint. For us, I guess it's relatively simple because we're low down the value chain. We're kind of the raw material end, so our supplier chain is not so great. It's more complicated when you look at the apparel sector, perhaps, but certainly being able to drill down, really understand where your sites are, really understand where the sensitivities are, I think is crucial, and this action really picks up on that. So from our point of view, this is a good step forward. Also, I'm really interested to see how nature is kind of creeping in the footsteps of climate. Climate has certainly set down a good framework. We hear calls for a Paris-style agreement for nature. We have the TNFD, so the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure now, which we're very interested to follow. We also hear for science-based targets. So I think certainly people are getting their houses in order for climate, but nature must not be forgotten. This is going to come fast. It's a lot for some business to digest, particularly businesses that haven't really interacted with the nature agenda before. But I think the support is there. I think there's a huge amount of support there from NGOs, from business associations. And I think collectively we really need to be able to step up and support the global biodiversity framework, and again the framework's there in the action. So very happy about that.
And if I may, just a quick follow-up. So what would make it easier for businesses like yours to do more? So, how can governments help you be brilliant?
So I think certainly for our sector, a framework around the restoration side. Again, I think we certainly as a company really understand our impacts. We understand what we need to do. The environmental impact assessment procedure certainly helps the kind of the front end of the business. But I think what we're really interested in is certainly how we can support nature in the active phase. And I don't want to do a spoiler, but we've been working with BirdLife to develop a code of conduct for the extractive sector, particularly looking at temporary habitats, and we will be launching that later this month. So if I can just put a little plug there, but certainly developing the policy that supports and making a level playing field as well, I think is really crucial, particularly focusing on the restoration agenda. Bringing that into spatial planning. There are so many conflicts over land use, and we sometimes end up a little bit piggy in the middle between all the different sectors of society fighting over. And I think if we can have a really clear signal about where one site is particularly important, so if it's in a corridor between natural habitats, really earmarking that for nature conservation, that would be really, really useful for us. Also, we see some crazy policies. There's often competing policies within a local authority. You see one sector again fighting with another. And we've had policy changes actually supported through HeidelbergCement, through the Quarry Life Award, working with partners, where we've been able to change policy so that more nature can be included in a reclamation plan. We don't necessarily have to reclaim a site to what was there before. We can actually look for positive change for nature. And again, I think this enabling policy to really be able to deliver is really crucial going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So, if I can just want to remind people to do the Q&A, otherwise I will be talking probably too much. We actually have one, so perhaps we will go to that. Martin, it's for you. They're wondering what can be done to lobby UK government to shadow or even embed new proposed EU biodiversity restoration legislation into UK law when they seem determined to find ways to avoid tying ourselves to the European Union. Or maybe we should be more optimistic and rely on our own UK targets and ambitions, which I think is for 30% protected landscapes, or acknowledge that HeidelbergCement Group policy will in practice be the driver more so than national legislation.
Great. Andy, that's a really nice bundle of questions, actually. So I think the first thing to say is that the great decision by, I was going to say the experiment of the UK leaving the European Union is interesting, because the last thing we wanted was a race to the bottom. And ideally what we would like is a competition either side of the channel for high environmental standards and ambition. It just so happens that the UK each part of the UK and the 4 countries of the UK, they have different obligations and responsibilities. So the Northern Ireland, for example, under the deal that was struck, the Brexit deal was struck, is obliged essentially to match European legislation. So they will be obliged to sort of follow what comes through with the EU nature law. And I think obviously the Scottish government, which is in favour of independence and future membership of the European Union, might also feel obliged to try and match that ambition. So we're left sort of with England and Wales. And I think what's interesting is that the commitments which are coming out globally are very specific about the percentage of land and sea to be restored, the 30%. It's very specific also about a restoration target. Currently, they're talking about 20% of degraded habitat to be restored by 2030. We'd like that to be much more. And indeed, we're certainly advocating the EU to play a leadership role. So the challenge for Westminster or Cardiff, for example, will be to see how are they going to translate those global commitments into domestic legislation. And I think the last thing that the UK government want to be is to be a bit embarrassed by how far ahead, for example, the EU might be going. So the UK government has a piece of legislation going through at the moment called the Environment Bill, and that's been setting an ambition to try and reverse the declines of biodiversity. And then it's going to be setting a legal framework for targets to be established probably next year. So there's still an opportunity to try and for the UK government both to match and potentially exceed what the European Union is offering. But in the end, it's all going to be through the implementation. And that's why I think that the work that Heidelberg does in terms of showing what the art of the possible is in terms of restoring habitat after quarries have been worked is essential, because it shows what can be done. And I think that gives real confidence to other landowning businesses about what they can be achieving. So I'm hoping that the UK and EU have a race to the top. They really do translate the global commitments into legal ambition. And then I think it's up to all of us to work together to make sure those targets are met in practice. Hope that helps, Andy.
Thank you, Martin. So we have another question from a good friend, a good long-term friend. So Boris Borov, who started the partnership off when he worked for BirdLife. So thank you very much for the congratulations, much appreciated. So the question that Boris asks, have you thought about further integration of sustainability and specifically biodiversity safeguards in downstream businesses?
So Boris, lovely to hear from you. And I think it's a really interesting challenge. So if are we talking about supply chains here, do we think? Is that what we're talking about, or what are we talking about here?
I think down through into the built environment.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So
It's
the ultimate product. See who uses them at the end. Well, I suppose this is it, isn't it? Really, it's how every sector in the economy steps up. So whether it's house building, whether it's other infrastructure, who are using some of the minerals which are being extracted, or cement which Heidelberg are looking to create. It's how do they set their own ambitions, and I would love the day where each business, house builder, major developer were obliged to report in a mandatory way about how they were making progress towards a nature positive future. And that is a sea change. But if you said the same thing 10 years ago about climate change, people might have thought, well, that's too ambitious. But actually now it's pretty much the norm to expect businesses to be able to report regularly on progress with regards to greenhouse gas emissions from their own, both directly or indirectly. And I would expect the same to happen elsewhere. I think that on house building, for example, I think while there are obviously clear planning guidance as to where houses should be built, I think there could be greater obligations placed upon house builders to ensure that biodiversity is very much incorporated into design. And there's all sorts of examples about how certain companies, like, for example, Barratt Homes, are trying to do just that. I don't know if, Kaz, you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So no, certainly echo that. And we work with the World Green Building Council, and sustainable construction is a very important part of our sustainability strategy. And certainly the R&D on concrete products that are more environmentally friendly can actually help take NOxes out of the atmosphere is really important part of what we do. I think we have to also support the downstream side with what our thoughts are on biodiversity. So indeed, actually spread our biodiversity strategy down to where the products are used. So ensuring that certainly any development incorporates biodiversity, whether that be through open green space. And the importance of this for the community is the evidence is growing. We know that for mental health and well-being, access to green space is really important. And therefore, I think in urban developments, this has to be a really key part of any development. Certainly when I speak with the building councils, then this is something that I try and advocate. There are many ways to integrate nature into the urban environment. I think we will see more on this. There's a lot of initiatives going around to green up cities, again, create these open spaces. We have the opportunity to do green roofs, green walls, and I think all lines of business need to be under scrutiny for what they can do for nature, and the urban environment is certainly an exciting area, as many species now are quite dependent on these areas within society. Thank you very much, Boris. Don't forget to use the Q&A if you have any more questions. But I wanted to come back to Martin around the COP15. I know we were involved in COP14. There was a 2-day business and biodiversity forum, and I'm really happy to hear that the same is going to happen at the in-person event in April, and we look forward to being involved in that. But at COP14, I think there were just 5 businesses there. So that really showed that back a few years ago, this wasn't really on the agenda for business. And I just wanted to get your opinion for how we can make sure that business do get involved, that business actually put the right resources in to enable the company to be able to support biodiversity, be able to have the personnel on board that can actually really feed into some of these negotiations.
Well, I mean, Kaz, I think what we're trying to do is make the Biodiversity Convention have real bite, have real teeth, and I think probably there's a lot to learn from what's happened around climate change over the last 2 decades or so, really. And I think that starts with raising global awareness of the crisis facing nature and the direct impact that will have on our own species. And I think things are changing. I think we've seen new voices, Fridays for the Future as a movement, I think has been very influential, as indeed has Extinction Rebellion, for example, by actually twinning the 2 crises together. So they talk about a climate and ecological crisis emergency, and I think that is right. It's a twin crisis. So part of this is about creating the public demand for action by politicians, and then also scrutinizing their own potential performance, and then linked to that a recognition that businesses have a huge role to play. So I think there has been a change in the business community regarding climate. I'm not saying everyone's great, and there's still too many businesses who are allowing representative voices to undermine environmental standards. Not Heidelberg, thank goodness, but I think that in a sense, what we need more businesses to put their hands up and say, yeah, we're up for this. We're part of this great challenge to try and deal with this emergency that we're facing. And we think we can be part of the solution. As I say, those companies that have an estate, have land, in some ways that's a bit more straightforward, because you can find out what's going on in your quarries, you can make real progress, and you can actually do good, which you've done brilliantly over the last decade. I think those with more complicated supply chains, they mustn't be allowed to get away with it, because it's complicated, the first thing you need to do is understand the impacts of your supply chain, and then of course using tools like the IBAT tool, which you mentioned, Kaz, to try and work out what potential impacts it might have, and then take steps to try and improve the biodiversity impact of your supply chain. So I really hope that not only that the politicians respond to the growing awareness about our biodiversity crisis, but equally more businesses say, yeah, they put up their hands and say, we want to play our part. And in the end, if they don't, then I hope there's actually reputational risk or business risk for those companies who don't take action. So be ahead of the game would be my message.
Thank you very much, Martin. I just want to, well, no, first of all, I just see that the chat is opened, and in there you will be able to find the link to the joint statement between HeidelbergCement and BirdLife on the upcoming EU restoration law. So please go there to download it. And also we have another question. So let's see what we have here. Thank you very much for the congratulations, Gloria. So Gloria asks, one of the main challenges in our path is the assessment of biodiversity baseline and measurement of impacts, progress or impacts. How do you see the development of measurement options in the future when more and more companies and authorities will face the need to assess their impacts on natural capital? How can we progress to a fully integrated approach among all actors in operations and supply chain?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gloria. And I think, you know, as we were saying earlier, the first step is to know what you're doing now. And that does require a bit of an investment to work out, well, what's currently going on, either on your estate or within your supply chain. And so that is an investment of effort. But once you know how you're getting on in terms of biodiversity, or indeed the wider services that nature provides to people, let's call it natural capital, then that allows you to basically then set ambition. And my own belief of this is that you need to set clear targets for a company to be able to help drive investment and action and behavioral change. And as I say, I think that's happening on carbon, and the same thing I think needs to apply on biodiversity. And so if you've done your audit and if you've set your targets, that will drive the action. And then I think we need really good, transparent reporting on progress. The BirdLife community is full of partners around the world who set particular targets to try and recover threatened species, and they will work ruthlessly to try and put in place the actions to try and recover those species. And in the end, what we do is we try and make sure that we are very open and honest and clear about what progress has been made and which species are performing well as a result of those actions. And we then learn, based on our own actions and the reporting, as to what we need to do if things aren't going the right direction. So it's a great learning curve. A target-based approach to action is something, however, I think could work for in helping any company become nature positive. But Kaz, you'll have a view because you're going to
So we're facing this on the ground, so we can give a perspective from actually going through this process. And unfortunately, it's not simple. The biodiversity baseline, particularly for our sector, comes with challenges. Many of our corridors have been open for several decades, certainly before there was any requirement for full kind of detailed ecological surveys. So we're very grateful to BirdLife for supporting us with this. And I think the database is out there. So there's a lot of information out there about historic land cover. We really are having to rigorously investigate these to try and support us with helping on the baseline. We at HeidelbergCement are doing a net impact assessment. We're focusing on habitats as the kind of the umbrella. I think going down to a species level, of course, gives you far more detailed information, but actually, if we want to really be able to assess and come up with something that doesn't take decades, then we decided that the habitat approach was the way to go. Regarding a kind of a integrated approach, I think this is quite difficult across sectors because of the different types of operations. So certainly for the extractive sector, I think that the methodology is going to be different from, for example, a business in the apparel sector, which has the complicated supply chains. And I don't think we can come up with a one-size-fits-all, unfortunately. However, there are a lot of synergies, and we're really excited to be part of the Align project, which is looking at coming up with a standardized framework for biodiversity measurement, and really interested to see how this progresses and goes forward, and looking forward to inputting into the development of that, because it's a really crucial point. I think I don't want to belittle carbon, but when you have one figure to measure it, it makes life a lot more simple than when you have millions of different species and tens of different sub-habitat groups. It makes life a lot complicated, but I don't think this should put people off. I think a lot of people get quite intimidated by the biodiversity topic, get quite bogged down in it. And I think there are a number of high-level frameworks. So Martin's already mentioned the 4 steps set down by Business for Nature. And I think being able to just take a step back, look at what you have, and then, as Martin said, look at creating targets that then you can work towards, and it is possible. But building on from this, and a question for Martin. So I attend a lot of business and biodiversity events, and it's great to see the business community getting bigger and bigger, but discussions are always centered around the kind of the high level, the strategy, understanding. So picking up on the action point from COP15, first draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and it's very much focused on understanding your footprint, strategy to 2030, this very high level, which of course is crucial if we're going to be able to support nature long term. But I do fear that actions now on the ground are getting a bit lost under this more high level. And I mean, personally, as an ecologist, I feel that we really need to be putting action on the ground now. Species are only seem to be going one way with population trends. So I'd like to get your view on this, about if you're talking to a business just setting out, about actually making sure that while we sort out the strategy, while we sort out the long-term view, we still do things on the ground now to support the species that are still existing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point, Kaz. And people have to start somewhere. And even if it's ground zero, I think it's a really important place to start, and to show intent that you're prepared to move. I think there's a really interesting experience amongst those involved in farming. So obviously agriculture is a major driver of biodiversity loss, and it's that's made up of thousands and thousands of individual businesses. And I think what's happened over the last 20-30 years is that there's been a community of farmers who have been prepared to take action to put wildlife back into their farms, often supported through incentives under agricultural policy schemes. And I think what's happened over that time is they've gone from being a very small number of individual farmers who are doing things and being seen to be a little bit peculiar while everyone else was trying to grow as much food as possible, to now actually a very strong, powerful voice for change, because they've seen the benefits to their own farms, their own businesses, and they've seen the benefits to biodiversity, and they're really proud about what they're achieving. And I think there's a lesson there, I think, for any business, because I think that if you're able to take practical steps like you have with Heidelberg on your sites, then I think that you can demonstrate impact, and that can instill pride amongst the workforce. And I think that's an important motivator, actually. So there's obviously business reputational issues associated with not doing the right thing, but also I think there are really important direct impacts on staff morale and motivation when they see tangible progress being made. I think it's okay to, even if a company is at ground zero, I think it's okay to say, well, we've got to start somewhere. Let's do a biodiversity survey. Let's twin with local ecologists to try and work out what's going on either on our land, or let's do that first exploration of impact by registering with IBAT to find out the impact of the supply chain, and then to talk about it. And no one is basically there to beat you up immediately. What we're trying to say is most nature conservationists we want to support business to be good, to have positive impact. So we are here to help. What we don't want is businesses trying to, delay action or to pretend they're doing things that are not. So which is why it's fantastic that we're able to report tangible progress with Heidelberg, the number of sites that have been restored, the area that's been restored, number of bird surveys done, number of proximity studies being done. All of that, I think, is to your credit. So I think you've got to start somewhere, and I would encourage any business to start thinking about how they can practically start building biodiversity into the way they do business. And yeah, there'll be loads of NGOs here to help, including BirdLife.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, just picking up on that morale, it's really exciting. What really kind of a warm part of my job is going out on site and meeting the plant manager, the quarry manager, the quarry foreman, and the pride that they have in the biodiversity that's living on their site. And we've just started, last year, an annual bird race, and I'm starting to get the entries in, I'm getting lovely comments from people that wouldn't necessarily be my key audience in an everyday basis. And it's amazing how people have a real affinity with nature. And I think it's just being able to foster that and get them included in the strategy and really kind of the real mainstreaming of biodiversity into business and get them enthusiastic. I'm aware that we've only got 1 minute left. Hopefully we've answered Alex's question. It's again looking at how some businesses are very small. We've talked about monitoring and challenges. We have a question for David Southgate. Can you confirm that historic restorations that relate to the aims of BirdLife but predate the MOU will be counted in the company's BirdLife biodiversity contributions? Yes. Definitely, we have this particularly with the UK. There's been a fantastic partnership between our business Hanson in the UK and the BirdLife partner RSPB, and we're super proud of what they've achieved, and particularly of the Neen Valley gravel pits, as mentioned here, which was designated a Natura 2000 site. So yeah, we certainly take those into account. And the same in the Czech Republic. They've got a long-standing relationship between our business and CSO, so we definitely take those into account as well. They're very important for us, even these older ones. And again, it shows that the partnership is actually even older than 10 years if we go back to these country-specific partnerships. So we've hit the time. I want to thank Martin so much for joining me for this latter half.
No problem.
Again, a big thank you to our VIPs, Patricia and Nicola, who were on at the beginning. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you to all the HeidelbergCement staff and all the BirdLife members and staff within the local organisations that have really made this partnership what it is today. It's for me, the exciting part is on the ground, and we couldn't do it without your enthusiasm and your participation. So with that, unless you want to say a final word, Martin?
No, just to echo all your thoughts, and a massive thanks to everyone who's been involved, and here's to a really productive partnership for the next 10 years.
Definitely, looking forward to it. So take care, everybody, keep safe, and no doubt see you on the circuit at some point. Take care and goodbye.